Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Tarot for Our Times. I'm Sarah, your medium on the go. And yesterday, when I was looking through Facebook, I saw a posting by a friend who it was about Zohran Mamasani, who it looks like he won the Democratic primary for the mayor of New York. And I've been not following it that closely, so I didn't know very much about him, but he seemed to express the concern of the Jewish community about him, and it's controversial enough that he shut off his comments for the post, and which I understand. But I did a little bit of a research on him, and I just before I start with that, I just wanted to let you know about my feelings about the Middle East and Israel and all of this sort of thing. And I know this is very controversial, and I saw that when I saw that posting from this friend, I thought, oh boy, I better not touch that for a YouTube. And then I thought, no, I better, because for that reason. So it took me till today to decide to do that. So the way I feel about this is that I definitely feel that Israel has a legitimate right to exist. But like thousands and thousands of Jewish people who live there, Netanyahu's got to go. Love the country, can't stand him. And I know this has been being Jewish. It's a pretty touchy topic. Now, the way I see of what's happened in the past couple of years was that I pretty much hold him responsible for the hostages being taken, because I feel as though he ignored the intelligence that he was getting, because this sort of attack does not happen out of a vacuum. And I know Mossad has its spies, and he either trimmed them back or didn't bother to listen to some of the chatter, and it could be a combination of both. And then the whole way that he's handled the Gaza situation has been absolutely appalling. And I do take issue with the real hardline Zionists who say, well, if I'm not on board for this, it means I'm anti Semitic. And no. On the other hand, I wasn't exactly in love with the tent pictures and breaking into the building at Columbia in New York, on the other side of the fence, and that they were threatening the Jewish students who probably had views like I did. But I think, going back to my college days, I probably would have felt very threatened by the Palestinian flag wavers. So to me, there's no real simple, you're either on this side or you're not. I think that Netanyahu is a Jewish version of Trump, actually. So, not knowing much about this, I will say that when I read about what Zohran, I'll call him by his first name since that's on all of his campaign stuff. When I first read about Zohran, I thought I must be leaning more left in my older age, but I am completely on board with him about what he wants to do as far as the free bus rides. Having lived in Seattle and Pittsburgh, in the very city center, the buses have been free. Now, I realize it would have to spread out to a wider area in New York, but it's worked. It's wonderful, and it's worked. And once you get out of a certain parameter, then you pay. And the housing thing too. It seems as though he, without putting it in these words, he pretty much wants to go back to rent control, because no one can afford to live in New York. That is a big factor that drove me out of New York. I knew that had I stayed there, I was never going to get out of that fourth, can you believe it, fourth floor walk up Tenement Street on East 7th Street, because I couldn't afford to move anywhere. And it was rent stabilized, so I knew that the landlord couldn't jack the rent up. But I have looked it up on the internet, and I have seen they did massive, in that building at 59 East 7th Street, they did massive renovations, and I could not recognize it anymore. I had no idea which apartment, and they're probably charging thousands of dollars because they got some suckers in from the Midwest who never heard of rent stabilized, and they just jacked. They're probably paying at least $3,000, $4,000 a month for those. But they look nice, but still kind of overpriced. So I like someone who's going to address that. Now, whether he can get that done is another story, but you figure there would be some improvement. But the Jewish community is very torn, and as I did read articles from, I think was a Jerusalem Post, Israeli publication, The Forward, which is an American Jewish publication. In fact, I just lived a couple of blocks away from the building that published it, and I think something from the Associated Press or something, USA, one of the American things. And what I gathered is that there are some that consider him, maybe he's an extremist. I doubt he supports terroristic groups, but I would take a little bit of a pause, and I understand they were, a lot of them were on board for Andy Cuomo. And I thought, that guy has too much baggage. He really does, with the sexual harassment, and he was I know someone from Rochester who has a friend that worked for him and said he was an absolute, if not a sexual predator, he was absolute bully and just awful to work for. Much different than his public image. That's what I heard. So, apparently, to some of the more Western publications, he has been reaching out to the Jewish community. And in fact, there have been some posters in Yiddish supporting him that have been around the city. So it's like, who do you believe? And I really, as I say, I like everything else about him, but I'm a little bit concerned. And if I still lived in the city and I was thinking of voting, I would want to know too. Now, they have a Republican, and New York does not shy away from Republican mayors the way Pittsburgh does. Pittsburgh hasn't had a Republican mayor, I want to say 91 or 92 years. But when I had my first job in New York, Lindsay was mayor. He was a Republican, but he would be the biggest rhino considered. And I was, there was Giuliani and Bloomberg. So they do elect Republicans. They're not as shy from them as Pittsburgh is. But I will say they have Curtis Lewa. He's absolute nut job. I lived in the city during the Guardian Angel days and saw him interview the guys. An absolute nut job. So I don't think he'd get too many votes. So I think, like Pittsburgh and some other cities, whoever gets a Democratic primary nomination is pretty much of a shoo-in for the mayor job. So it's all very confusing for me. So I thought, well, why not do a reading on this? Because as I say, I don't know that much about him, and it'll be kind of going for the purity thing. So first, I want to do a reading on what he stands for generally. And, because I also happen to believe in the two-state solution. And I also believe that the Palestinians have been used, they have been the pawns of terrorists like Hamas, and moved from one country to another like the Jews have. and that they haven't all been innocent. Some of them have bought into it, and others, it's just like we have our Trumpers here, which are in the minority, I think now, and then we have the more rational people, and I think that probably it's about the same percentage in the Muslim world. As far they just want to make a living and live in peace for the most part, but it's the leadership that's the problem. It isn't the people, it's the leadership, which I think the NATO conference this week is a great example about. So first I want to see actually what he stands for, to see how close I can get, and then the second reading was, will he be able to reach the Jewish voters? And I think that right now I think, well, maybe he isn't all as bad. I've seen who's endorsed him, a lot of people I respect, and I do like the idea of bringing some youth into this, into the political world, because being the mayor of New York, I have heard, is the second hardest political and most important political job, and there's a lot of truth to that. So it affects us. And I usually and Eric Adams, Tammany Hall, 21st century, do you really want that? But then I remember the IHIP lady saying that, and I have to agree, because I lived through, I think I left during Koch. I mean, there were some doozies, I'll tell you. And I think it was they that said, because of the language they used, they said New Yorkers have a tendency to elect assholes. And I've been there, I know that. So let's see. The first thing I want to do is see what he really believes. And the second one will be a shorter one. Okay, so for the basic energy card we have, we have the King of Pentacles, which shows a stable, fiscally, stable guy who's come up the hard way. And so this is interesting. He has said he's going to tax the way he's going to fund all of this, and I think that the housing, my feeling has been with the housing situation, it's going to collapse under its own weight, and the government may have to take it over now, which this could represent. Now people say, how inefficient is that? Well, the landlords have been absolutely appalling. I can tell you from experience. The one I lived on the west side, they were good because they lived near the property. But I mean, you've got mice coming out of light sockets, and the rats are running rampant, and it's just awful maintenance. They don't keep them up. So how could the city couldn't be any worse with that? Okay. So this guy, there might be some fiscal responsibility with him. So crossing the energy is okay. The Five of Wands, which is there could be some infighting among the Democrats. Had I lived in New York, to be quite honest, I probably would have voted for Lander. He's the one that got arrested by ICE. I don't know if I don't know enough, but I'm saying I might have, but okay. So then we have the infighting among the Democrats because Cuomo dropped out, but he's going to maybe run as an independent. Eric Adams is going to run as. I don't think that's going to be enough to put Curtis, because New Yorkers know what an absolute fruitcake he is. But there is going to be infighting, and part of this is the Jewish. It's not only the difference between the candidates, but it's the Jewish vote. And I will say, it looks like there's conflict within the Jewish vote. And I can tell you, it is not a monolith group, because I remember when Obama first ran, I could tell where all the Orthodox Jews lived because they had McCain signs. The Reform Jews had Obama. Now, the second time around, the more orthodox, they were on board for Obama, so the line got a little blurred. So I use that as an example to say they are not a monolith. So leading up to all of this, we have everything's up in the air. They're reaching for balance. The city is such a god-awful, bloody mess that this is telling me that there's a search for something new. Okay. The after tarot, we have, the Wheel of Fortune. And it's hard to tell from the regular deck, but I would say it looks like it's more in motion, it's more spinning. I think it's kind of like karma will tell the tale. Karma's going to tell the tale as people find out more about what this guy is all about. It could be that he's telling the Jewish community that with his Muslim roots, he's not a radical. Certainly not going with Hamas or anything like that, but he feels strongly about Palestine. And he may not be quite on board. Don't have a problem with that as long as it isn't for the destruction of Israel. That's pretty much where I draw the line. Okay. So underlying this, and I'm trying to get the handle on what this is and what his views may be about this. This is telling me that he's probably he's grasping for a message. To keep everyone in balance, Muslims and Jews alike. Okay, so then we have underlying thing. We have the High Priestess. Now, with this in reverse. What this tells me is there could be some secrets about his past in this that may not be too savory. The guy's only, 34 years old? But there may be stuff back in college that he did that may set the Jewish vote on edge here. But what we did in college doesn't necessarily mean what we do when we get it. So there might be some stuff in the back, in his background, that gives people pause. So he may have to do a real convincing of I've changed, I've modified my views. Pentacles in reverse is saying this is going to be a really, really difficult thing to, and this also tells me that there may be an issue with his donors. Wall Street is not on board for paying higher taxes. I mean, well, what the hell? If they're paying, if they're paying $20 million to live in a penthouse, they can afford a few more bucks in their taxes. Okay, but then so he's got that sort of thing to worry about. There's a lot of balls in the air this guy is juggling. So then we have, the theme of which brings me to the fact, the theme of the reading, the theme card, since I came across it, it is for today, it is on the thumbnail, it is the Two of Swords. That's having to make a decision about something and taking off the blindfold and maybe going with the heart rather than thinking it to death. So that's the dilemma of the Jewish community, and probably of him as well. So, but in this particular, I almost forgot about that. In this particular case, the Two of Wands is in reverse, and what this is saying is he really knows what he has to do, but it's very difficult because the blindfold needs to come off and he needs to be more realistic. This may be in part because of his youth. So in opposition of this little base thing we have, the Seven of Pentacles. I don't know, this is telling me there is some stuff in his past that I'm not sure he's quite on. I mean, I'm really not on board with a lot of stuff. I believe back in college and shortly thereafter. But he may find it very hard to walk away from some seeds he's planted, which may be a little bit on the rad side. So what this is saying, not impossible, but he's got his work to do. And so she's walking away without picking the poisonous fruit that she planted. And so that's probably where he is now. Okay. Then we have, in the conscious thoughts, I'm going to be as open as I can, and I will be. That's why this is him. I'm reaching out to the Jewish community, and he has, from Manhattan, the Bronx to Brooklyn, he has been talking to these groups. I think I should listen, see if I can find them on YouTube. I'm sure he will be doing a lot more when he sees the breakdown of the vote. Okay. See, we went through this with Summer Lee. There were the Jewish community had some problems because of her certain stance that she was taking on Israel that they found unsavory, and this Indian woman, but her first name's really hard to pronounce, but her last name was Patel, and very competent, very good, who challenged her in the primary. And in my old childhood neighborhood of Squirrel Hill, which is one of the bigger Jewish communities in the U.S., it was a sea of Patel signs, a sea of Patel. Of course, Summer Lee did win by 70%, but that 30%, there's 30%, I'm sure she had to pay attention to that and address that. And of course, they all voted for her in the election, but that was mainly to send a message, and I'm feeling maybe there could be I'm kind of resonating with that parallel thing here, although I don't think her views were quite as strong as his, but there were a few things that she did that made some people in the non-Jewish community a little bit unhappy, but I think she's kind of growing into it. But be that as it may, I understand what this is about. So he knows the best thing is to be honest, maybe to say, oh, that's what I believe then. I pretty much modified these things living in the real world. Subconscious thoughts. Oh. Time to get rid of all the illusions. This is a promising card because I think that there may be some soul searching and him letting go of some of the mythology around this whole Middle Eastern question with Israel, and by seeing that, to get rid of the smoke screen and see there's probably enough blame to go around, but to realize there's a big difference between bad leadership and the people. And so I think that there's been some inner works that he needs to get rid of, a lot of the illusions that he was fed by, his religious elders and that sort of thing. That's promising. We'll see if that happens. It's promising. So in the past, and I think he was in the New York Assembly. I think that's his. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me in the comments. But he's not inexperienced. Okay, so okay. So in the past, we have the before lovers, and I think this is the whole thing of Eve having, in this case, Eve having, chomped on the apple and trying to give it to Adam, and she's kind of in a seductive little thing. He's resisting. So this is before they stand side by side. It also might mean that with her in the lower position, she's not equal as in the regular card. They're both equal. So a lot of this controversy is around the treatment of women. So he may have to do some self-examination in the more every religion has their very unattractive view of women. There's no Judaism, Christianity, the Abrahamic religions all have a woman problem. So this may be coming to grips with it. And maybe he just sees her as maybe he sees her as just trying to seduce. So interesting how that little scenario evolved. Okay, so there's a lot of this going with the Seven of Cups is like a reassessment. And also, and it's not just like, well, it's something I'm going to tell the voters, but maybe I need to look inside because I'm going to be instituting some policies. So I've got to maybe change my thinking. So, looking encouraging. So in the present, we have the Five of Swords. So he's up against, I would say he's up against corruption. Even though he didn't win by the whole thing, they've got a very complicated way. I think that there's another formality they have to go through because it was close, a little closer. They think he's probably in, but so he's realizing that he's up against people with more bucks, and now he's got this other burden to carry, which is the Jewish vote thing, and maybe him having to let go of some of these ideas, which is the swords, because he's driving away some of the voters. Okay. Then in the near future, within days, the Page of Cups, which is it's pretty much self-examination. It's the beginning of rethinking things. I'm going to say that he may have enough character to say maybe there's something a little bit fishy of what I have been. I'm not going to, that maybe my political views on the Middle East, I don't feel if they're modified for more rational thinking, that maybe that does not compromise my spiritual attachment to Islam. So this is the beginning of, the pages are the beginning of reassessing a lot of things on a spiritual and emotional level. I think what this is telling me is that he's trying to make this real. He's this young idealistic guy. He's trying to make it real. So in the After Tarot, we will go a little bit, let's see. Okay, so in the After Tarot, we've got the World in reverse, which is saying there's a lot of, and this goes back to the subconscious thing, kind of like a lot of unfinished business that he needs to do to be able to, some real reevaluation that he may need to do to be true to himself, but yet have some compassion for the Jewish voters. Because I honestly think he's like, I'm going to be the mayor of everybody. So further into the future, we have, the Ten of Cups in reverse. They've gathered their fortune, but I'm going to say the combination of the oligarchs and the oligarchs and those who oppose him on principle, all this sort of thing, the real establishment, they're going to use this to discredit him, and possibly putting out a message that he's a lot more radical, because they're ruthless. They will stop at nothing, and they are not going to they do not want to let go of their money. That's the main thing, but they may use his religion and some of his political views, possibly to exaggerate them. Okay, so this is kind of in depth, so I'm going to do a how he sees himself and how others see him. Okay, so how he sees himself is the Nine of Cups. He's seeing himself as he evolves. He's seeing himself in a better emotional and spiritual place to address this, although he shouldn't get too comfortable there. That's the danger, that how he sees himself. Is it you see, this guy here, it's different Nine of Cups than it is another deck. He looks a little bit celebratory, but it's also like he's making sure those cups are all polished up and everything. So this is pretty much how he sees, is being very, but also being very stable and very competent. How others see him, let's see how others see him is the Eight of Cups. Now, I will say, we've been dealing with the Jewish element. I want to say that there's a lot of Muslims that live in New York. Probably not as many Jews, but a sizable number of them. I think that some of them are worried that he may be walking away from his principles to pander to the Jewish vote. And let's see, on the Jewish side of this is that, yeah, he's walking things back, but he's standing still. He's standing still right now. And is he really walking away? So this talks about mistrust from both of those communities. So in the hopes and fears element of this, we have the King of Swords. So this is about him being honest, but it gets very, very tricky in the world of politics. He wants to be very honest, lay his cards on the table, or else he wouldn't be reaching out to these Jewish groups. But there is a fear that his honesty may not win them over. So, whoops, these still hot. These are sticking to me. Okay, so the conclusion and the lesson of this reading is perfect. Two of Pentacles. He's balancing his beliefs and what he needs to do for the voters. I think the fact that, see, the thing is I lived there and I know. I even lived on the Upper West Side for a while, which is like the heart of Jewish liberalism for people that have lived there for like 5 generations or whatever. And see, a lot of the liberal Jewish people, they love the buses and the lower rent, and because that attracts the artists. There are no, unless they're on trust funds, trust me, there are no artists left in New York. They're bringing their stuff to New York to sell it from, Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Detroit or wherever the hell they can, or Buffalo or wherever they can afford to live. So there is the balance of that, and that ship is very rocky in the background. So I think he's doing a lot of soul searching. What do I believe? What do I not believe? About the thing of, a lot of the right wingers are lumping him in with, radical, democratic socialist. Then he's a radical Muslim terrorists, and that is not necessarily the case. And so there's it's a very complex thing. It goes back to a lot of people on the left became very anti-Israel, to the point of the Jewish liberals calling them anti-Semitic in a number of ways that kind of did show their true colors too. That's another very complex situation. So, as I gather the cards up, I want to see, in a shorter reading, I want to see, is he going to be able to reach the Jewish voters? I like the fact that he is making an effort now, but there are some, and I would imagine some maybe, I know there are probably some people in New York who may have family members or loved ones that are still, you know, be imprisoned in caves in Gaza and being very badly treated. Now, the Palestinians have been, going through hell with that, but don't forget, Hamas has been really mistreating, so nobody's an angel in this, and there may be some Palestinians complicit with this. I mean, they're villains all around in this. So I really want to see if he's going to be. From what I gather from this reading, and I really went in with this by not having any opinion because I'm in the advantage that I really don't know a lot about this guy. I mean, there are parts of the policy, there are things I really love, but there are things that concern the Jewish community that I don't blame them. I would probably be wanting a lot of answers before I voted for him or wrote him off. Because don't forget, there's going to be probably 4 candidates. Right? We got 2 independents. We got crazy nutty Curtis on the Republican end, and we've got Mr. Tammany Hall, Adams. I mean, there's a lot, but a lot of them, see, he has the advantage of being an incumbent, and a lot of times New Yorkers are schmucky enough to vote for the incumbent because they're the incumbent. I know, you cannot imagine how many mayoral races I lived through in that town. And the stupid reasons, and they vote for them and then they hate them like 5 minutes after they're inaugurated. So, as I shuffle the cards, will he be able to reach the Jewish voters? And I think this is a good question because I do think he's done a lot of soul searching. I think that he wants to be sensitive to that community. Now, there may be those that disagree with me, but I can't help with this is what the cards say. I cannot help what the cards say. I'm not going to sugarcoat or twist or anything like that. So, shuffle these 2. So I want to see in a shorter reading what. Okay. Yeah. What is? Okay. I think I've shuffled these. Okay. So I'm going to see what the state of the Jewish voter is right now. And as I say, it's tricky because they're not a monolith. I'll tell you. Or the difference between Orthodox and Reform is like, I was brought up Reform. It's just the Grand Canyon. I'm telling you, they seem to coexist pretty well in Squirrel Hill, but you can really tell them, the dress and all this, the demeanor. You really can tell those groups apart. Okay, so let's see, where is the Jewish community at? Here is Nine of Cups reversed. 9 of Cups reversed is that they're being thrown out of their complacency. It used to be pretty cut and dry as to who they were going to vote for, and I'm pretty much talking about it for the, as I say, the Hasidics in Brooklyn are going to, be a whole different. They might even vote for Curtis. I mean, really, I think that group would probably vote for Curtis. Or maybe between Curtis and Cuomo. But okay, so they've been shaken out of their comfortable world of pretty much knowing who they're going to vote for. This is really spun them for a loop, and I'm sure that the whole opinion race, ranges incredibly. So the energy crossing that is, oh boy, of course it is, the Ace of Cups. There's so much in this card, I don't even know where to begin. This is a very emotional vote. The post I saw from my friend, it was a very, I knew that there was a lot of emotion behind to the point where he didn't want the comments, and because I think he was afraid of getting too emotional. So we've got that element, we've got the moon, we've got the eye, the third eye, which is the intuition. A lot of them, the gut feeling is no, no, no. And very, very emotional. This reaches on, I could talk all day about this, but this is a very cultural, religious thing. It has to do with the entire history of Jewish people in New York from the time Peter Stuyvesant didn't want the 23 family Sephardic Jews, living in New Amsterdam, and that there was anti-Semitism from the very beginning, and they had a very rough time until they really prospered. So there's that history. It's sort of like the Eckhart Tolle pain body. So that's sort of like the basis of the pain body, because trust me, I lived there. There is anti-Semitism in New York. I found it in my own neighborhood. So there is and it's a history, very complex. Okay, so, I think I want to do, so the before tarot is, well, here we go. This is, in the past, this is about very, very worried. There's the little bit of the 9/11 thing. There is still with the blood on those swords, there's still a very personal feeling about the October 7th thing. It's emotional, and some of them may realize that this guy had nothing to do with it, but I see that there is a connection. So this is definitely lying in the past. And so, as a result of their being taken out of their comfort zone in a way, as far as the candidates go, this is a challenge he's going to have, really. Oh. You know what this tells me? If he does a good job, and it seems like he's a very good, if he does convince them, and I want to think it sincerely and not a con job, is that I think this is the one barrier. They can remove this thing. They'd love to support him, and it could be a celebratory. If he can reassure them, they'll be on board. They'll be on board for him for sure, because he stands so much for what they want. This is a very interesting thing. Okay, so on the conscious thought level of the Jewish community, if he's going to be able to get them, we have Five of Cups, minor arcana of the, is it the Death card? Yep. A lot of grieving, a lot of really living in the past. It just goes back to so much of the history, that there's he's going to have to really, this is, usually I should think this would be subconscious, but this is on the conscious level, and I really think it's the October 7th thing, because too many of them are directly connected to this. Okay, so that's that's a big challenge. On the subconscious level, It's a feeling, it's a deep down insecurity, feeling pretty off balance. It's funny, even though there is such a heavy New York influence. In fact, I think my grandfather and his family came through New York when they arrived at Ellis Island in the late 19th century. That there is sort of a fear that things are very imbalanced, and that he's going to have to really work to make them feel secure about this. So we've got that. The temperance is about, it's about fear. It is about fear. So there's a lot. This is about, a lot of it is about fear. So okay, so we've already done the past. So in the present we have, he could be moving forward. This is going to be work, but he could be moving forward. He's really got to till November. So I think he's really interested in pushing, and there may be some talking, negotiation, and saying, he may say, look, I don't agree with everything that you do necessarily, but that should not impact you. And vice versa. But I think if he's saying, I may feel as though Israel is a lot to fault for this, I certainly don't want to see their destruction. And so in that way there could be a moving forward. So coming up in the immediate future in this next few days, we have here we have the devil coming in, and I'm going to say that this is about addiction and codependence. I would say that this is a kind of a turn in the reading I hadn't expected. There is a certain addiction to the pain, and it's hard to break loose of the pain and the evil that has been. That maybe, I think it's just bubbling, it's bubbling to the surface. I think this guy has brought a lot of this stuff to the surface, and it may not be an unhealthy thing for that to happen. Very interesting. So, and also, the devil represents the corporate, the corporate candidates too. It's like, what team do I play on? Because there may, with Eric Adams, the way that the Trump administration has treated him, I suspect he owes them. He owes that. This is what the Jewish community may want to think about. He owes them, and so money will become funneling in. So Eric is tied. He's tied to the devil. He does owe. And the thing is, in moving forward, if it may be an emphasis, we may not agree on the Middle East, but this may be the more important issue. I mean, I don't see him doing anything terrible to the Jewish community. That's just me, but then that could change. That could change. Okay, so then, moving right along, we have the after tarot with the Six of Swords. So, in its upright position, they've reached the destination of they've gone from the rough to the smooth waters. They're having a hard time getting there, which is telling me that there may be many in that community that may have a very, very hard time to get to the shores of Zohran. Zohran. He may not, it depends on how many of them he can bring over, but there are some that will never be convinced. It's just like the hardcore I think there's a hardcore of the Jewish community that may be part of the very Orthodox and maybe the Reformed too. That just occurred to me. So As we move a little further into the future, we have the Four of Pentacles. But this is interesting. There are a lot of them that are going to decide they're not going to hang on to their differences and beliefs. But then you have, because it's in reverse, but then you have this, the death figure. I think it's the fear that that they want to let go of it, but there's certain fears that are bigger than they are that is going to make it very difficult. So let's see. I think I feel like I need to, as we get closer and closer to the election, it's this came up in another deck. So you've got the Five of Swords, which may mean but in the end they may have to, as the picture becomes clear, they may have to, if in this free will time, boys and girls, they feel if he can convince them that in spite of his views, they're not all that radical, or he's a different guy than he was in college, and that he's no threat to the Jewish community, he may not lose as many as he thinks. But this is starting to tell me this could be a squeaker. It will divide the Jewish community, but it could be a squeaker. So let's see. As far as the Jewish community goes, how they see, as far as being able to be won over, how they see themselves, which I think is really important. The Knight of Cups. They're being very cautious that they're seeing themselves in like not being taken in by the smooth, romantic, new figure type of figure they haven't seen before. On the contrary, it doesn't mean rejection, but it's saying we're not going to be easily seduced, which is what this guy does. We're not going to, they're really going to put him through his paces. How others see the Jewish community, and I want to go maybe going over to Bernie and AOC, who do endorse him, and I may not agree with them on everything, but I do admire them. Okay, so how others see them in this scenario. Others are seeing them like they cannot hang on to a lot of the stuff that they will feel. I think the Bernies and the AOCs will feel that the people, the oligarchs and whatever, that want to make a bigger thing out of this, and it possibly is that they may see them as maybe clinging stubbornly to some of these views, which could get in the way of Zohran being elected. So they may see that as a stubborn community. So in the hopes and the fears of this community, we have, I would say the fear is, definitely this is the fear of having they're afraid that maybe they have a smoke screen and thrown in front that maybe he's like in the Knight of Cups in reverse. Maybe he's just telling them what they want to hear and throwing all this other stuff as a smoke screen. That is the fear. I want to see if I think I'm going to pull one for the hope. That the hope. Okay, Eight of Pentacles in reverse. The hope is that they can somehow break away from rigid thinking and be able to look at this whole thing clear, instead of having everything just lined up in a row because that's what they're supposed to believe. So the big conclusion card of this is going to be Judgment in reverse. interesting that this has appeared before. Justice in reverse is, because of the history, not only of the Jews in New York, but everywhere, is of being judged badly. I think that some of them I think a lot of them want to give him a chance to be, to talk to them. They're listening because they're afraid of being judged badly if some really god-awful person becomes elected. And they don't want to lose the sense. They're kind of torn between being in their own community, but they also realize with these figures floating around that they also live in the larger community of New York City, and they can't be that isolated. So what this is telling me is that they really want to see this guy really talk to them, be honest with them, to show them that they don't really have anything to fear, but they don't want to be lied to. They don't. This is where they stand now. Now I could do a reading next week, and it could be very different. This is really in the present energy. So this is pretty much about they want to listen to him, but he's really got his work cut out for him, and he's got a lot of soul searching to do about what is good belief and what is really toxic belief. And this goes back to all this religious fundamentalism and everything, which leaks into politics. So just as as awful as the extremist Muslims are towards women and gay people, hey, you get the fundamentalist Christians that are just every bit as bad, and then the super Orthodox Jews that relegate the women to the upstairs of the synagogue and keeping them separate from the men, and they cover their hair just like they wear the wigs, instead of the veil. So it's every religion is not immune from being criticized for not being women and other people. So he may need to really look at that, but he's got to also do some soul searching about the balance of what's going on in the Middle East. So we're going to see if he's up for the job, and I will be doing check-in readings about this to see what happens, because it's the whole nation is paying attention to this. So till the next time, I'm going to sign off. So bye.